seizures of investment, forced attempts to place foreign companies in mixed corporations. Investment is now dramatically down, and the word on the street is that the Venezuelans are offering very good terms for new partnerships. And by the way, it's the same word about Bolivia. What is also interesting is that a Pew study in 2007 found that most of the populace within Latin America were not buying the Chavez line about either the United States or his view that Latin America needs a new architecture. Because understand something about Mr. Chavez. He is not someone to be underestimated. He's set up his own TV channel. He has set up his own oil company. He's done really creative barter arrangements. He's used money to buy Argentinian debt. He has financed lawyers for Bolivia. He has intervened and interfered in any number of countries in Latin America, and he has not been ineffective. The problem for the United States has been we have suffered the greatest loss of soft power in our history. I was in Europe at the end of the Vietnam War, and believe me, our stock today in Europe falls far below what it was at that time. And we are not able, and this is a separate topic for a separate take, we are not marketing some of the most powerful soft power opportunities this country has. The Democratic primary that so many people are pulling their hair out about is, in my view, one of the most glorious things any democracy can show. That this is a country by and for the people, and it doesn't matter where you're from or who you are, you get a fair shot. That is a very important lesson. It's an important lesson for Chavez's folks. It's an important lesson for Araujo's folks, and this is something we all need to take on board. Because the other side of the coin, when you talk about Venezuela and you talk about Nigeria, there is a new player in town, and that player is China. And let me tell you, folks, the Chinese have eaten your breakfast, they've eaten your lunch, and they're looking at dinner. And they've got it together. They have just done a $7 billion deal in the Congo. They've just done a multi-billion-dollar deal with Chavez, and their deal is different than your deal. Just like the Russians' deal is different than your deal. Mr. Putin goes to Libya, he offers debt forgiveness, he offers arms, and he offers energy. Mr. Putin goes to Venezuela, he offers Kalashnikovs, he offers helicopters, he offers oil, and he offers gas. And he offers Iran as a proxy state to move in, as well as close relationships with China. The Chinese model of addressing infrastructure directly addresses what the Nigerians need. The Chinese are listening to what people need. Between June 2nd and June 6th, there will be a conference in Beijing on Nigerian infrastructure. Everybody that's anybody in Lagos is going to be going to that conference. They're not going to Washington. They're not going to New York. They're going to Beijing. That is important because not only has America's stock weakened, but America has new competitors. New competitors for its role, new competitors for its leadership, new competitors and new models of institutional development. And what is incredibly dangerous for our children is that autocracy is starting to get a good name. That people are starting to understand, what's democracy if I can't feed my children? What is democracy if they can move in and do X, Y, and Z? These are fundamental issues that need to be addressed when Mr. Chavez is setting up Petrosur, Telsur, Banco del Sur, an alternative to the free trade agreement of the Americas, and a grand pipeline that will go through 9 countries in Latin America. And he is not doing it alone. He is doing it with significant assistance. So I speak to you not as some political scientist. I speak to you as a lawyer with cases going on in these countries. And one of the things I will tell you is where I disagree with many of my colleagues. When you see these big disputes between either Nigeria, which you're going to see quite a few of because of the reversals of privatizations, or Venezuela, where we've just had this massive case going on with Exxon, it is very often the intent and the practice of white shoe law firms to take these countries to international arbitration. Now, I have to tell you, I am not criticizing Exxon for one moment. I think what they did was historic, and under the treaty may very well be correct. But I want to suggest to you, as somebody who fights in these courts, there are other options, including fighting in these courts, working the media in these countries, and actually engaging with people locally to protect your investments. It is a different mindset than international arbitration, but it is important because we need to be on the street in Lagos, Abuja, or Harcourt, or Caracas, or Maracaibo. We need to be engaging with local elites, and we need to be pushing forward that we care enough about our investments, and we respect their culture, their language, and their institutions enough to give a local fight a chance. Now that, I want to tell you, from a strictly legal perspective, I'm not saying you drop an attempt to use a bilateral investment treaty. I think bilateral investment treaties have been seminal and important for the protection of investors. But when you have to use a bilateral investment treaty, you've lost. Because if you're in the extraction business, they're just going to pay you out a percentage of what you would have made. But if you're in the extraction business, you want to be there today, and more importantly, you want to be there tomorrow. And the way to be there tomorrow is to engage as hard as you can locally and not give any quarter. That's number one. Number two, there's a dialectic to what I call BRIC investment. That's Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And I'm seeing it right now in a dispute I have in Bolivia. When India and China invest in a country, the amplitude, the ability of the local government to nationalize is greatly reduced. So they have to be extremely careful if the new investors, the South-to-South investors they bring in, feel that their investments are not going to be welcome. So even though our stock may be down, the fact that this new investment is coming from other countries actually may serve to protect the investments of Western companies, including Western oil companies, in some of these regions. One of the other important issues to understand is what I call, for lack of a better word, the complicity index. The complicity index means that the United States at some point has to become engaged in assisting energy and commodity companies to get a fair deal in parts of the world where rampant corruption, where political corruption, I'm not even talking about money, I'm talking about the political corruption that we saw in many countries where certain oil or energy companies will engage in politically questionable deals to legitimize an expropriation, for instance. And they will use that political